my name is Bridget, and today we're going to be talking about my secrets to catalyzing spiritual experiences on the awakening path. And some kinds of spiritual experiences you may not even know that are possible in the human realm, as well as some kind of like warning to catalyzing these experiences too fast, because that can cause like major issues and stuff, and how to do it in really harmonious ways for long-term benefit. So it's gonna be really fun discussion, so let's get into it. I just have one announcement before we get into it, which is that all of my retreats for 2023 are now up. I have my Sedona Women's Retreat. I think I have like 2 spots left for that one in March. And then I'm doing Europe for the first time since 2020. Going to do one in Ireland and one in Glastonbury. So if you want to be a part of any of those retreats, go check them out down at the links below. And now let's get into it. Okay, so for this conversation, again, I have really enjoyed doing podcasts and not being on this film thing. When I get onto this film thing, it makes me want to talk faster. It makes me want to get to the key points quickly. And that's not what I'm about. That's not what it's about. There's so much more context and more conversation needed for these conversations. So I'm going to go into it in the smooth way that I would my podcasts. And I invite you to just like take the time to really dive in and sink your teeth into this subject, because there's so much here. All right, so the first thing is that on this journey, I think a lot of us are seeking, hence spiritual seeking, hence spirit. We're wanting communion in whatever the way that looks like for us. Maybe we're wanting more connection, more guidance, more just like feeling of aliveness or something more, or like that bhakti bliss feeling, which I love so much. And so that seeking that you're feeling, which is, the result is, say, a spiritual experience, is super valid. And I feel like that constant yearning is something healthy that keeps us expanding or wanting more, which I think is very good. And that can lead into, in our modern world, like where we get into bad habits, to like seek those experiences. And this isn't going to be a per se topic about, say, like psychedelics. I'm going to do a separate video and podcast for that. But this one is more focused on how to catalyze these experiences from an integrative space that is inclusive of your humanness. And what I have learned, what I've experienced, now I think it's about 15 years on the path, maybe just under, is that the more, ironically, I know that I'm known as like the ET, connection person, but ironically, the more that we embrace our humanness and our soul and the things that are true to us and truth, universal truth, the more we can catalyze these experiences. And there's lots of reasons, and I'm going to get into them later on, why not to just blast off, or why not to just like push it and expedite these things, like a little Kundalini yoga fire added to it, throw in some psychedelics, like just whatever it takes to kind of like get these experiences. And that can cause like pretty crazy repercussions, and some of which I've witnessed even in the past like month with certain people. And I'm like, whoa, okay, we do not want to pressurize too much. So how do we go about this? Like, how do we seek the call? How do we continue on that path without pushing it too much and also not doing enough, right? So that's what we're going to be getting into in this conversation. And so I'm all about the middle path. That's kind of like classic mystic Christianity, Rosicrucianism, where it's not, say, too much in the physical realm, and it's actually not too high in the spiritual realm where you're out of body and out of this dimension. We need to take our bodies and take all of the human experience with us into the 5th dimension or into the next reality. It's inclusive. It's this and. So in that, we want both. And for as high as we go, we need to be able to ground just as much. So when we start actually going really, really high, really, really fast, that can cause like major imbalances, and it can create like, some stuff I'll get into later. And so we really want to be inclusive in that way and be grounded as we move forward into this. So I want to now share my top ways of how to catalyze these experiences. So the first way, and I swear this works, maybe not like every time or in like a crazy profound way, so you think, is to be bold and courageous in your everyday life. This isn't me telling you to go like meditate for 5 hours in a sacred site, for 30 days. I'm saying like in your everyday life, where can you be more honest with yourself, with your relationships, with your job, with that which you're like wanting to create and be in service to and step into? And when you are able to have that honest reflection and then have, say, that conversation with that person, with your partner, with your friend, with like reconciling that you don't want to be at this job, or you're really going to step into the career or the passion you've always wanted. When you do those things, like it is heard. It is witnessed by your soul, by your higher self, by the universe. And then you're rewarded. And you can't do it for that. Like, that's not how it works. I'll get to that in just a second. But it is true that the more you really step into who you are and step into truth and speak for truth in a really balanced way, again, not like extreme or something, but in a really genuine way, things happen. And it might lead to a profound dream. It might lead to some kind of like awakening or opening in your psychic abilities, insight, inspiration. These things are profound. And it's so funny because it's like so the thing we want to avoid. And I know even a lot of you listening to are like, yeah, sure, okay. And we still, even after I just said that, can't be honest with those things that need to change in our lives. But when we do, it will start rippling out into bringing more of spirit and bringing more of the higher realms into your experience and create solutions and miracles that you never even knew were possible. So I invite you to do that. And I have had really good track record with that one. That one's been my top one. The next one, which is also really, really high and led to really powerful, like that, this one specifically leads to full sober DMT experiences, this one. And this one I talk to Dan Winter about a lot. And this is the state of pure intention. And this isn't necessarily something specific per se, but it's being in a state of love, of humility, of pure resonance with the highest good of yourself and the highest good of others and the highest good of the planet and the highest good of the ancestors. And when you're in that place, they hear. It is heard. It is witnessed. And I've said this before. You guys have probably heard it, especially on my first podcast episode when I was talking about the ancestors, is that the ancestors in this case, like that's a lot who comes through in this pure intention, but it can also be nature, like responding in radical ways. It can be your spirit guides. It can be an angel. It can be so many things when you have this pure intention. And it can be general. Again, it can be general, and you can be specific too, where like you truly want like to move forward in the best way for yourself on this path, in this new, say, venture you're pursuing, or in this new relationship, or like you get to this place where you're just surrendered and open to the highest. And that responds, again, with good things in your life, and that response from spirit too. And I'll give you an example. I like being a bit more private nowadays. I really went for it in my mid-20s, and it's one of those things where I actually cultivating more of a solid space for myself spiritually and my relationships and stuff. And so I'm not just I'm gonna tell you all these things that happened to me, which definitely get more clicks and likes, but you're gonna just have to trust me and try these things out. But I will give this examples to just kind of drive this point home. I watched and you never know where these things are going to come from or when they're going to come from. So let me preface too with a bit of this, which is that you also have to trust the timing, and you have to just keep on showing up. And sometimes it sucks, and sometimes you might not have anything happen for a year or 2 years or something. It could be a while or maybe a month, and it's and then in that moment it's well, let me reach for something, let me catalyze the experience. And if you just keep on showing up in this humble, open, cracking, free way, it'll respond. And the example that I want to share right now, inclusive of this perfect timing thing, is that the environment doesn't have to be perfect. It is important, to put yourself in really good, energized situations, sacred sites, nature, critical in the long term over time. And if you're wanting to open and raise your vibration. But this experience happened to me in a city where I was sleeping next to a smart meter after watching a movie. And it was one of the most profound spiritual experiences I've ever had. So it will happen when it's gonna happen. There's nothing gonna stop it. And I think that was good for me to experience so that I could relay that to you. And it's not you have to fly to Tibet to get something to happen. So in this experience, I was met in probably a 6-hour full DMT journey. I've done these things so that I can prove that that's actually what it is. A full 6-hour psychedelic experience. I guess DMT, in the big ones are only 10 minutes. I get it. But the point is that it was a long, very psychedelic journey, very, very profound, with the ancestors that were connected to this movie that I saw. And I'm just going to kind of keep that private. And they're not from my lineage, this ancestral stream. And this continues to be the case time and time again, that yes, it's so important to connect with our ancestors, and I talk about that a lot. And we're one humanity. We're one peoples. And when when ancestors hear the pure call of someone, they will go help them, no matter what their color, no matter what their race. And in this case, that's what happened. And so these ancestors came to me, and then they took me into the ancestral realm, where they showed me my ancestors, and they showed me my Native American ancestor, and they showed me the things that need to be addressed and need to be looked at. And so I was okay, yeah, if you're gonna come tell me this, I'm definitely gonna act on it. So for the next few days, and it happened to be right before Thanksgiving, the next few days I painted all this art, which maybe I'll run through on here. That sounds interesting. So I painted all this art connected to the pain of my ancestor and the loneliness of my ancestor and ancestors. And then I had this huge breakthrough of understanding the true history of what actually happened in Salt Lake City, and the pretty much genocide of the natives there by the white who were also my ancestors. And so it was super wild, and it led to this deep healing. And so there's a couple things in that. One, it's going to happen at the perfect timing. Two, when you have this pure intention and show up, someone's going to hear the call and someone's going to come help. And then when they do, part of that is that they know that you're going to act on it. So it's just like a muse with Elizabeth Gilbert's work when she talks about the muse and inspiration coming. If you don't act on that inspiration, if you don't act on that piece of guidance that comes to you, Spirit's all right, well, I'm going to go help someone else that is. And it's not one of those things we're constantly guided, but it is that you do get more support the more that you show up. That's the way that it goes. And so these ancestors knew that I was going to act on this, and I did, of course. And so I had this like profound spiritual experience. And that's something to note too, which I hadn't really thought about till now, is that some spiritual experiences, it's like this wonderful scavenger hunt down a rabbit hole where it's leading you to more and it's asking you to do something. And that is a lot of what spiritual experiences, they sometimes just call you out. You're like, you want to have a spiritual experience? Okay, great. You're going to be called out and asked to step into that next level of who you are, and as a soul and on your mission, which is pretty epic. Like, yeah, like if it's like some higher, some super supportive energy is going to like usher me to that next level. Yes. And I'm going to heed that call. So heeding the call is another really important step to this. So that you're seeing all these pieces, right? Are you seeing all these pieces that catalyze this energy? I hope that you're really feeling this. And the other piece that I wanted to say, real quick, jumping around to the being brave and courageous and aligning with your truth, which was the first one, is setting boundaries or ending certain dynamics is just as profound as, starting and finally telling that person how you feel, or starting that new creative passion that you've always wanted to do. So ending things is just as important as starting things. And and that's a part of the refining our alignment with ourselves and our reality. So I wanted to include that piece as well. So the last piece to the natural catalyzation of these spiritual experiences is the allowance. Is the allowance of change. And I think that it's like, well, yeah, no, I'm ready. Like, I'm ready. And it's like, are you? Are you really ready? Do you know what that actually means? Like, for your life to change in this certain way. And so that allowance of things to look different, which is inviting in some uncertainty possibly, and new growth or uncomfortability. And so allowing yourself to be in uncomfortability of allowing these experiences to bring change is a part of that too. And so if it's like, Spirit's like, yeah, they're not ready, we want to make sure that this is going to go well, then it's not going to happen. So being ready for that change is very important. And so now I want to go into kind of how to be ready for that change, which is a real cultivation within your own life. And this is inviting in these spiritual experiences too, and allowing this creation of a sanctuary with yourself, where in a space internally where you don't self-abandon, and where you don't betray yourself or bend or, be super nice, or where you don't show up in the way that you want to, that you're meant to, like for yourself and other people and your gifts. So it's really cultivating this sanctuary of alignment, and also that's a space that's really safe, like where you're safe with yourself. And I like talking about it this way, that it's really about yourself. And it is important to have the environment and the external supportive, which we'll get into in a minute, but it's really about creating a safe space with yourself. And when you do that, and when these certain parts within you, these certain traumatized parts, these certain like incredibly gifted parts feel safe, and there's a unification of these energies, the more whole you are, the more vibrationally aligned and high then you are, which then aligns you with these higher states and with these higher experiences as well. And so when we're in these like fragmented spaces, or we keep on like repeating these patterns, it just makes it more challenging for spirit, for our souls to, it's like, okay, we've told them this 10 times, but they haven't changed it yet, or they keep on doing this. And so it's important to create that space of safety with yourself. And golly, be so gentle and kind with yourself in that process. And that's like actually the first step to creating the safety of this sanctuary container with yourself, is being kind to the process, is being kind to yourself. And that is what actually, being hard on yourself is like worse. It's kind of like you're in an abusive relationship, like internally. But if you can be like, oh, yeah, I forgive myself. Like, I've done some kind of stupid mistakes of things recently, and I just have been like, oh God, that was not good. And I've, mended it and taken care of it. And I'm like, and I forgive myself. Like, dang it, I'm really going to not do that again. But I also forgive myself. And being really kind is really important to that. So again, creating this space where change can take place, where a high spiritual experience or a high new download can actually land and has a place that it can be held. So in this, of course, is having the environment that is conducive. Now, again, I said that with, next to crazy electromagnetics in a city, I had this spiritual experience. But it does matter. It does matter if you can get yourself closer to nature, if you can get yourself closer to sacred sites. Really, really good. If you can't, for some reason, you get to create that sacred space. And you get to create the environment with the people that encourage those energies, that are love, that are home around you. And if they're not, then you might need to make some changes, right? So it's creating this environment that is conducive to this upgrade, to these downloads, and to powerful healings and changes. And that's the next part that I want to get into, which is like, be careful not to go like too fast with all this stuff, because as sometimes before, a positive, powerful spiritual experience, there can be healing crises or challenges that come up, or traumas that bubble to the surface that need to be addressed too. That is a spiritual experience, and it is so profound and so beautiful when these parts of us feel safe enough to come to the surface to be healed. So we want to make sure that we're available for those moments. And then there's these other times where these parts are not safe and don't feel good, and then all of a sudden you're like, throw a bunch of psychedelics on it, or you throw a bunch of like crazy breath work and like so much stuff that it's like, and then it freaks out and maybe shuts down more and freezes more. So I want to talk about that now and get into those details of the, say, not too fast, and so that there can be the environment for healing and opening. So it's the sanctuary, the container, the kind, loving space inside of yourself and around you for these things to take place. And then also it's the speed, right? And so with the other experiences that I told you, that kind, pure intention, that making a change, and being bold and having that conversation, those aren't necessarily going to cause like a crisis. That those are natural progressions. We're made for those kinds of heeding the call. But when we're adding fire to it, it can be too much. So a good way to distinguish if it's too fast or too slow. If it's too slow, then you'll know because nothing's happening, and maybe your life is continuing to not be what you want it to be. So that's a good indicator. A way to check in to see if it is going to be too fast for you is to look at the why of why you're doing that thing to then catalyze that experience, possibly. And so it is, am I doing this to get high? Really, like being really self-honest, or to just like have a shift, to just like have a state shift. And again, validating that we want bliss experiences. That's a healthy impulse. But to do it to just have that state shift, or to get high, or also to get out of body, like as an escape or like an avoidant energy, to kind of cope with human life or the challenges that you're facing, are indicators that it's probably not going to be for the highest, which luckily spirit might slap you for doing that. But it might not lead to like actually what you're wanting, and actually that healing, that breakthrough that's going to lead to a better life or lead to those blissful bhakti experiences. So those are some nice questions that you can ask yourself. And when you know that it's in alignment, this is what I wrote, are you patient with all aspects of your soul? And this is a part of being kind to yourself. it's a little tricky because people can get complacent and just not do shit for like a decade. And that's not it either. Like, you need to really continue to be doing the things, but also have patience. So it's one of those things that you really have to tune in and be honest with yourself. But having patience with your soul, having no expectations of what it needs to look like, and having, again, that pure intention for the highest good of yourself and for others. So you're like, it's fine. I don't care if like anything, quote, profound happens. I'm just showing up. I'm here with pure intention. I'm patient on the journey, and that will be rewarded. And that'll be rewarded in this deep cultivation that happens over time. And there will be wonderful little nuggets that spark along the way. And I have all kinds of videos. I invite you to go back to the past ones and see how there are beautiful things happening all the time that you just don't maybe notice, or you don't actually acknowledge, where you're like, oh, wow, I had that really crazy dream. It's like, well, did you acknowledge that universe communicating with you and you having a quasi spiritual experience? The more we acknowledge the ones that are happening already, the more that come. So that's important. And then there's the subtle experiences, and the more that we can also like embrace the juice of like the most like tender whisper from spirit, or like the beautiful embrace of like a lover in the human experience, or like the beauty of like a little flower, those kinds of things. Those are just as profound as like these gross, like, whoa experiences. And so really embracing the subtlety, really embracing even the little things that are happening and being grateful for them will catalyze more, and creating situations where you can be in good states to do that, like going out into nature or being with good friends to have that. And one piece that I wanted to add is that having beautiful human experiences is a spiritual experience, and that you might not think of it that way, but I will say that over the past couple of years, the level of depth that I've had in my friendships and in my partnership, it's like, this is so beautiful. Like, the levels of intimacy and bonding that are possible are just as ecstatic as these like crazy cosmic experiences. And I know we seek kind of those cosmic experiences because they're novel, and also because it might not feel safe to be a human, and we're sensitive, and all those things and stories, which are also true, possibly for whatever level of like trauma we have. But the more that we integrate those pieces of trauma, and the more that we find that safety and sanctuary within ourselves, the better it can be in our human lives. And then we start to make that the bliss spiritual experience. And that is actually the beginning of 5D. It's not somewhere else. It's right here. But it's that embracing and inclusiveness of all those other energies. So the last thing that I wanted to speak about are what can happen if you go too fast. I need to throw this in. And I will do a whole nother video podcast about healing and psychedelics specifically. So I just want to bring this through so that it's disclosed, because it's important. So doing things too fast, like too much yang spiritual practice or psychedelics, those kinds of things, can bring psychic splits if you're not grounded and you're not integrating those experiences, or you're doing them too often. They can create those psychic splits. And I've seen it a ton. Just go to any of the sacred sites, and most of the people walking around are like half there. It's like, well, that's not what it was meant to happen. We want this embodiment, we want this integration, we want this clarity that can then emanate and exude these energies and really hold them. And if it's too much too fast, like, we can't quite do that. And that's okay. And maybe if you're in that experience, I've been there, don't worry. Like, we have moments of this. It's just about coming back in and really grounding and integrating those parts, which we can talk about in other times. This is another piece, is that it can, when we're catalyzing these experiences, it can cause the traumas inside of ourselves from the past to melt. So it's like an iceberg, like melting really fast, like blowtorch, like whoosh, like to it. And that can create fight or flight. And so we don't want to melt or thaw this numbness or these frozen parts too quickly, or that can create like major anxiety, that can create panic attacks, that can create healing crises. It can create like a lot of challenge, and then it can refreeze and then be even farther away from feeling that safety and sanctuary to opening truly, genuinely, and being inclusive in you so that you're like full and aligned. So having these like catalyzing experiences that are really externally provoked isn't always the best. Often the most profound healings and the most profound healings that I've had are through the most subtle, the most safe, the most honest and caring in environments that happen and naturally unfurl gently over time. They're not something that's like, all right, let's do this, those have not, I don't think anything has come from those experiences. Even though I can be a pretty young person too. So that's really important for healing. And then also, again, for the spiritual experiences, yes, you might get to these like heightened states, but it's not going to be something that is consistent, that stays there. And also it can bring more imbalances, to the hormones, to the mineral levels, which then can kind of drop us lower after those have subsided, which then makes us want to get more. And so just being aware of that and really approaching it just from my advice of what has worked, take it or leave it, through the subtle, through the patient, through the pure, and getting into that really humble state and that humble space, and also that empowered space. Like, right, I'm still saying, hey, be empowered, create boundaries, do what you're meant to do in this life, have that conversation. So there is assertiveness in it, and and that is kind, that is caring to yourself and to those other people. And so how can we invite in kindness? How can we invite in more truth, more love, and more patience with ourselves? And those are the biggest catalysts to the spiritual experiences that I've had. And continuing to show up. Doesn't matter how long. It might be the entire lifetime, might be another 10 lifetimes, whatever. I'm not trying to get out of anything. And the more that we're in, the more that we can actually get out, ironically. But we can't do it for that. That's like the key. You can kind of start, and that might get you on the momentous trajectory. But it's really important to, just take it one step at a time. So those are my key tips and secrets to catalyzing these spiritual experiences. And I hope that they've helped you and nourished you and left you inspired to take those next steps. And particularly take that next step, whatever that thing is. Be very honest, be radically honest with yourself right now. What is a conversation you need to have with someone? What is a relationship dynamic that pisses you off and it isn't working, and that is, or just like is subtly irritating? Like, work with it. Get yourself in the situation that's aligned. And if there's anything I've learned in the relational realm, communication is everything. Communicate, and if it's not available with that other person, then make changes that's going to be in the highest good of both of you. So those are some pieces for the journey, and I hope you've enjoyed this video or podcast wherever you're listening or watching. Again, I've got my in-person retreats, so come and sign up for them. They're going to be so great. That's one of the key pieces that Dan Winter talks about, is that catalyzing spiritual experiences alone is actually kind of more challenging And in group fields, there's more energy, there's more frequency to catalyze those experiences. That's one of the reasons that I do them. So getting in with other people and having this unified field will accelerate it as well. So there's another way. And so I absolutely invite you to be a part of those with me and with the other amazing soul tribe around the planet that will be there. And I will see you soon.